Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Mountaintop 9. In this installment, I want to talk about the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I'm going to go through every Nightmare on Elm Street film, and I'm going to tell you what I think of each one. I'm going to give you the pros and cons. I'm going to dive right into the very depths of the heart of this fucking series. And I want to thank Patreon subscriber Eli for, kind of pushing this idea along. I already had down written on a piece of paper that I was going to be talking about my favorite Freddy's Nightmares episodes, and I haven't gotten to that yet. But when he asked me recently on the Patreon, he asked, how do you rate the different Nightmare on Elm Street films? As soon as I read that, I thought, well, that's a good idea for an episode right there, rather than just respond in a comment and kind of give it like short shrift and not really go in depth into it. I thought, no. That should be a full length podcast episode. So that's what I'm going to do, because I am a big time fan of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. I grew up on them, so they mean a lot to me. So let's get right into the series, shall we? And the way I'm going to do it is I don't have a ranking list. I'm not going to rank the movies and put them in a certain order. Instead, I'm just going to start at the original, and I'm going to go through all of the movies and just give my thoughts on each movie as we proceed. So let's start with the Wes Craven original, A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. This one right here is hands down the scariest of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. The original incarnation of Freddy in Wes Craven's original idea was that he was this oppressive, just demonic, evil madman. Okay, he's going around in the dreams and he's tormenting these teenagers. Not only is he killing them, it's not like he's just going and he's straight up killing them. He haunts them and torments them in dreams for weeks on end before he even finally does them in. And I think that's the really creepy thing about Freddy in this original Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, when you see Tina and Nancy in that one scene and they're talking about how they've been seeing this burned man, wearing a hat, and he has a red and green sweater. And then you see the character that Johnny Depp plays, the character Glenn. He looks up when he hears them describing this phantom person that comes in their dreams. And you can tell by the look on his face that he's seen the same fucking guy in his dreams as well. And that is just fucking creepy. Just the concept that this person, this thing, this entity is going around in the dreams of all of these kids and torturing them, haunting them, frightening them in their sleep. And he's doing it for extended periods in a mysterious fashion before he finally kills them. I just think that's really cool. And that first kill scene in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, when he stalks Tina, when you see the outstretched arms of Freddy, and they look like they're a fucking mile long each. I mean, each arm is stretching clear across. I mean, you've never seen anything like it. The first time you see it, you're like, that is so surreal. It's so dreamlike and twisted. It perfectly fits your idea, the very concept of what a nightmare is. It's just totally unreal. And when you see Freddy's face and he puts the razor blades up to the side of his face and he says, "This is God," before he starts chasing Tina down that alleyway, that is just a really frightening scene. And then the fashion in which he murders Tina, it's so brutal. The way you see the slices happening on her stomach and then the blood coming out as her body, flips and drags along the ceiling, and blood falls down and splashes when she hits the bed. It's such a brutal scene. Words, I really can't do enough to overemphasize how great that scene is in horror history. It's just such an important, brutal, terrifying horror movie sequence. And I love how Freddy's boiler room looks in this original one. It's like a labyrinth. It's like a labyrinth from hell. It's just, there's all of these nooks and crannies to it. And Freddy even has like a secret lair in there where he has, where he's collected things from his different murders. over the years. This isn't the silly, joking, laughing Freddy Krueger that you get in later incarnations. All right, as you move along through this series, Freddy turns into more of a light-hearted character. But in this original Nightmare on Elm Street, in Wes Craven's true original vision, he's a repulsive, sadistic, evil character that delights in tormenting and in torturing and in snuffing out innocence. And a lot is left to the imagination, even down to what he looks like. You don't see Freddy Krueger's face like full on with a ton of light hitting it in this original movie. In this original, he is hidden by shadow a lot and by the hat itself covering. So he's kept a lot in the shadows. It makes him more foreboding and sinister, his presence, and it's just downright creepy. To me, as a horror film, it's purely and simply one of the best. No matter how many remakes they do of the original, no matter how many sequels they were, nothing can take away the power of the original Nightmare on Elm Street. That is an essential Wes Craven movie, and it's an essential horror movie, period. Now, moving along to part 2, the thing that they got right in Freddy's Revenge in part 2 is they kept the dark atmosphere of the first one. In part 2, there's a lot of really scary, haunting type scenes. It keeps that oppressive, hellish atmosphere. Like you see the main character in this sequel, the boy, when he goes down and he looks through that window into his basement and he sees Freddy reaching into the fire. Stuff like that, like I said, is just really hellish and really oppressive. And so they got that in droves. The score is also very dark here in the sequel to Freddy's Revenge. So I like all of that. But part 2 is very uneven. There are things where obviously it deviates wildly from the original as far as the rules go, because in this sequel, of course, you've got Freddy coming out in that swimming pool sequence. He's coming out into real life and he's slaughtering people just wholesale. He's walking around with this fucking glove and he says to all those teenagers at that pool party, he says, "You are all my children now." And he has his arms outstretched with flames emanating behind him. And I like how that one teenage boy, how he says to him, he says, "Hey man, it's okay, it's cool, we're here to help, we're here to help you." You know, he's like trying to act like he's gonna be a fucking friend to Freddy Krueger, all right? And Freddy just looks at this kid and he's like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" That's what he's thinking in his head. And then I like how he takes his fucking glove and he cuts him and he says, "Help yourself, fucker." I love that part. And yeah, Freddy's running around at this pool party and he's slicing and he's dicing. A lot of people don't like that because they say, even Wes Craven himself said, you know, that scene doesn't work because you're taking Freddy out of the dream world. In the dream world, he's omnipotent. He's all powerful. He can, you know, he can fucking teleport. He can bend the rules. He can do whatever the hell he wants in the dream world. But if you bring Freddy out into reality, of course, his powers are going to be diminished and he's not going to seem as scary. You know, I can see that argument. I can understand if they did that throughout the entire film, how that would be a problem. But quite frankly, I love this pool party massacre scene where Freddy comes out into the real world. I think it's a kick-ass scene. I don't care what any of the detractors say. Anybody who tries to take away from the scene say, "Oh, it doesn't work because he doesn't look as big as all these people, blah, 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 and he's running around killing people and he's not in the dream world." I fucking love it. I love that scene. That's a classic scene. And I also like the scene where he busts out of the dude's stomach. You know, when you see Freddy's face pushing through the skin of that kid's torso and then he busts out of there and he kills that other dude in the bedroom as the dad's banging on the door on the other side and his claws go through the wood of the door and you see blood dripping down the door. I love that fucking scene, man. And you see Freddy in the mirror and that other kid, he's going, "You killed him, you killed him," and he's crying and Freddy's just fucking laughing and wagging his finger. I love that shit, man. Part 2 has some really classic, memorable scenes, and you know, it may be a little uneven and there may be some silly stuff. You know, that part where the bird flies out of a fucking cage, you know, that stuff is silly, but part 2's fun. I like part 2, quite frankly. Is it as good as the original? No, it's not. But there are things I like a lot about part two. I'll never forget, one thing I want to point out is that opening school bus scene where the school bus is driving. And those girls, they're like, hey, driver, that was my stop. And the bus driver, how he just goes right past their stop. He just hits the fucking gas and he goes right past those girls' bus stop where they're supposed to get off and they're going to go home and they're going to change their fucking panties and they're going to go, maybe have a salad with fucking ranch dressing and shredded cheese and some croutons. You know how it is. You know how it is when you get off the bus stop, or maybe you want a Michelin meal, some fucking, there's little wheels and cheese macaronis. Maybe that's what those girls wanted to have. But the bottom line is, those girls saw their bus stop. That was their bus stop. Time to go home. End of the fucking day. And here the bus driver just goes right past their stop. So the girls are like, hey, driver, that's my stop. I can relate to that, When I was a kid and I saw that scene, I was in school and I could relate to that because there were times where there'd be a fill-in bus driver, a substitute bus driver, and it would always worry me. Like when I was real young in elementary school, one of the things that would worry me is this substitute driver, is he going to miss my bus stop? Because I had that happen before where the bus driver was just a fucking idiot, a stupid moron. And he goes right past your bus stop. And you're like, hey, bus driver, hey, you just went past my stop, you fucking moron. You want to turn the bus around and take me home? Stuff like that makes you anxious as a kid. So that scene was effective to me when I first saw it because I was a young kid in elementary and I had those kind of anxieties. Now, moving along to part 3. A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors. This is the one that took Freddy to the next level and made him into a pop culture phenomena. It really is. Now, obviously, Part 4 ratcheted it up as high as it could go. Part 4 is the one that elevated Freddy into the stratosphere, but Part 3 is the one that did break him. Part 3 is the one that broke the character and made him a pop culture fucking phenomenon. Part 3 is the one that added levels of humor and quips to the Freddy Krueger character that made him a little bit more funny, a little bit more relatable to the audience, and it also showed him really full on a lot, with a lot of light hitting, the effects of Freddy's face. You got clear looks at Freddy's face in this one. In parts 1 and 2, there was a lot of shadow over Freddy, and Freddy looked very malevolent. Even though the makeup was done differently on Freddy in part 1 and in part 2. In part 1, I think the guy that did the Freddy makeup was named David Miller. And, his whole concept for Freddy's makeup was, pizza, like fucking pepperoni and cheese. That was his, idea of how to make the burn makeup on Freddy's face. And then in part 2, you had Kevin Yeager doing the makeup effects for Freddy's face, and he gave Freddy a very sinister, witch-like look. And in both movies, 1 and 2, they kept him in shadow a lot, just to add to the malevolence, add to the evil feeling of Freddy. Well, here in part 3, like I said, they give him humor, and you get to see him full on a lot. He's brought right out into the light, and he's just a wisecracking maniac in this one. But still keeping a little bit of the elements of fear in this one. Part 3 kept a little bit of the scary feeling. One thing I really like about it is it has Dokken on the soundtrack. I love how you have that song Into the Fire on here, and you also have that cool song at the end, Dream Warriors. That's good, catchy, hard-rocking 80s material right there. I love Dokken, so it's great to have them on the soundtrack. And part 3 has memorable set pieces. Who can forget the scene where Joey's on the bed there, and he thinks he's gonna get wild and woolly with that fucking great nurse with the tits hanging out. He thinks he's gonna get wild and woolly on that damn bed with her and give her the fucking ride of her life. That's what he thinks. And then, of course, as her tongue is coming out, all right? He realizes that this bitch is actually Freddy Krueger in disguise. And that scene is fucking legendary. As is the scene where Freddy busts his ass right out of that television and reaches his arms down and grabs that girl. And he says, here's your big break in TV. You know what I mean? And he's like, welcome to prime time, bitch. And he shoves her head right into the fucking TV and it fries her ass. I love that scene. That is classic right there. And the funny thing is that for years, I always thought Freddy at that part was saying, fuck the prime time, bitch. I thought that's what he was saying. Fuck the prime time, bitch. But as it turns out, I've watched it, over the years again and again. And yeah, it does look like he's saying welcome to prime time, bitch. I mean, that's what everyone has always said he was saying. But for years, I thought he was saying something else. But yeah, he's saying welcome to primetime, bitch. I know this because I confirmed it recently. I had to put that scene on and I had to watch it like over a few times just to make sure he was saying welcome, because it's kind of hard to make out. There's like a lot of sound and a lot of fucking pizzazz going on in that scene. That's an absolutely electrifying scene. So because of that electrifying, loud, pizzazz-filled nature, it's easy to mishear some words here and there, don't you think? So yeah, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, it's a classic movie. Now, if Wes Craven had done it, it would have been a darker film. But, Frank Darabont and Chuck Miller, I think that's the guy. Is that the fucking... Or no, Chuck Russell. I'm sorry, I got the last name wrong. Chuck Russell is the director, and then Frank Darabont, they were like working together on the script of this movie, and it was much different than the ideas Wes Craven had. And it took Freddy and made him a superstar. Nightmare on Elm Street 3 absolutely made him a superstar. I mean, parts 1 and 2 were obviously successful for what they were, or else New Line Cinema wouldn't have kept making movies, all right? They wouldn't have turned it into a franchise. But it was part 3 that made Freddy a superstar, and it's a classic. Now, moving along to part 4. Part 4 was the one where when I rented it when I was a kid, I didn't want to return the tape, and I hid the tape when it was time to take it back. And my grandma and my Uncle Timmy, they were looking for that damn tape because they knew it needed to go back to the damn video store. But guess what? I didn't want to take it back. I loved the damn movie. Nightmare on Elm Street 4 is just, it's a classic. And the funny thing about it is we're no longer in purely horror film territory here, my friends. A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, the way I've always described it, it's like if you took the Nightmare on Elm Street series, but then took Beverly Hills 90210 and Saved by the Bell. You took the flair of those shows and you mixed it in. If you like fucking blended it with the Freddy universe, this is the movie you'd get. That's what Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4 is. It's just bright. It's filled with, lots of color and pizzazz. And you've got Freddy just hamming it up like crazy. Robert Englund just goes full tilt with the character. He's a fucking big pop star now, the Freddy character. He's putting on shades and fucking standing on the beach. And it's just, this is Nightmare on Elm Street. This is the highest level. When Nightmare on Elm Street 4 came out, this is what made Freddy just everywhere. And, this was around the time Freddy's Nightmares, the television series, came out. And, Fangoria magazine was putting Freddy on the cover all the time. Anytime Fangoria or Gore Zone would put Freddy Krueger on the cover, they sold more issues. More issues of those magazines flew off of the fucking magazine stands. That's just the way that was. Freddy was a hot commodity at this point. And the thing about Part 4 is I have to judge it on the merits of what it is. Part 4 is not a fucking hardcore dark horror movie like Part 1. So I can't judge it by those standards. I gotta judge Part 4 as if, okay, I want to watch a lighthearted, entertaining movie full of lights and fucking pizzazz and everything else and Freddy doing wisecracks. Okay, do I want that? Do I want that kind of lighthearted, fast-paced entertainment? Well, if the answer is yes, then Part 4 is your movie. Part 4 is your movie, hands down. If that's what you want, if you want a fast-paced, fun, lighthearted movie, Part 4 fits the bill. There are memorable scenes in this. That part where he drowns Joey in the fucking waterbed, and he says, "How's this for a wet dream?" And then he dunks him down into fucking water. That's a classic scene. Or the scene, where the dog, when Freddy comes back in this one, when the dog pisses the fire and then the bones and the flesh and everything gets put back together on Freddy, and then he comes out and he gets Kincaid. When you've got the one kid down in his fucking, it's like an outdoor garage it's like a garage or something, and he's out there practicing all of his fucking martial arts moves, and he's doing kicks, and he thinks he's gonna be the next Bruce Lee. Man, that's very memorable. That makes me want to go outside and practice some fucking martial arts, alright? That makes me want to fucking go down to the dojo and hone up on my fucking skills. Very inspiring, motivational stuff right there. I mean, even the intro song that plays at the beginning of this movie is memorable. That girl that plays her Tuesday Night, she sings the song that's in the introduction to this movie, and I love that song. That song's really fucking catchy and memorable. So I like that, and you got the Anything song, and then I could have sworn there might be another catchy song that's in this movie too, but yeah, man, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, it's a fun one, so it gets 2 thumbs up from me. Now moving along to part 5, The Dream Child, the thing about part 5 is you'll notice the shift in tone. Parts 3 and parts 4 took Freddy in more of a pop culture realm, and he's wisecracking, and there's not lots of light hitting the face of the character. Well, part 5 makes an attempt to put Freddy back in the shadows to make him more of a creepy, evil character. And it also has this gothic atmosphere to everything. The director of this movie, Stephen Hopkins, he wanted a very gothic look to this movie, and he certainly achieved that. Much different look than what Renny Harlin had with part 4. But my one big complaint about part 5 is the way Freddy's makeup looks. Freddy's makeup in this one has that cheaper, like, mask look where you can tell that they came up with a way to put Freddy's makeup on quicker. So it just has this look to it. It has like a cheaper look to it. But other than that, I do like how they keep him in the shadows a little bit in this one. I think that makes, it a little bit darker and everything. It fits the atmosphere of the movie. Now, the kill scenes in this one are a lot of fun. The way Dan gets killed. First, Freddy's, tormenting him in the car, and then he gets on that motorcycle, and you see pieces of the motorcycle being injected into Dan's skin and kind of melding with his body. It's like a really extremely, I think it's kind of a disturbing scene, the way Dan's character gets killed here in part 5. It really is, because you can like feel the pain as these pieces of metal are injecting right into his skin and melding with his body. Like, it just looks very painful. You kind of get that sense from the scene, and I like that, man. That is a classic kill scene. Out of the whole series, I think that kill scene of Dan on the fucking motorcycle, that's some legendary shit. And I like it too when he looks over and sees Freddy in the passenger seat of the truck, and he's like drinking, and then he takes the shit and he pours it on him, and you see the steam, and he like pulls his arm off and shit. That's some good stuff, man. So that's a classic scene. And then the way he kills Greta is a fun scene as well, where he goes, "Bon appetit, bitch." One notable thing about A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5 for me personally is that this was the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie I saw on the big screen. Now, as a kid, I had already seen all the previous ones up to that point, but I had seen them at home on TV, like taped off of HBO and shit like that, and I'd watch them on the TV over and over again on the VCR. But the difference with Part 5 is this was the first Nightmare on Elm Street film that I got to see on the big screen. I actually saw it at the drive-in, and it was I saw it paired with Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. That night at the drive-in, we saw Friday the 13th, Part 8 was the first movie, and then after that one was over, they showed Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. Now, what more classic thing could there be in an 80s kid mind like mine than being back in that moment, and here I'm seeing the two titans of fucking horror to me, Jason and Freddy, paired together on a double bill at the drive-in. You can't beat that. That's just a fucking priceless memory. So I don't give a fuck how many people shit on Friday the 13th Part 8 and act like that movie's garbage. Do you know how much garbage is produced on a daily basis by people. Give me a break. Compared to a lot of things, Friday the 13th Part 8 is a fucking superb movie compared to a lot of horror. I'm not saying it's the greatest horror movie ever made, but it's a fun fucking movie. And it's certainly better than every Friday the 13th movie that came after it. When New Line Cinema got their hands on the Friday the 13th series, they put it straight in the shitter. That's what they did. They took the Friday the 13th series, they rolled it up, and they shoved it straight into a shithole. Shoved it straight up an asshole. And that's where it's remained nestled ever since. So don't give me this shit about Friday the 13th Part 8 being a lousy movie and mocking my poster. You can go fuck yourself. Moving along to Freddy's Dead. This is the 6th entry in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. When Freddy's Dead came out in the movie theater, I got to see that one on the big screen as well. So that one is very nostalgic and personal to me because I vividly remember my mom taking my sister and myself. You know, she took us to the movie theater, and I still remember going into a fucking KB Toys or something before we went to see the movie. And when we were in the toy store, my sister said, "Yeah, well, we're going to see a movie." And the guy at the fucking clerk, the guy checking us out at the toy store, he's like, "Oh yeah, what movie you going to see?" And then my sister, who at the time I think she was only, let's see, how old was I? I think I was 8 years old at the time. Something like that. And so she was 6. And she said, "We're going to see Freddy." Said something like that. Said how we were going to see Freddy. And the clerk, the guy working behind the counter at the toy store, his face kind of just fell. He didn't seem that interested in the fact that we were going to see Freddy. I guess he thought we were going to see All Dogs Go to Heaven. Or some shit like that. Maybe he thought we were going to see The Little Mermaid. So he was fucking disappointed when my sister said, "Yeah, we're going to see Freddy." Alright? And I'm thinking in my head, you got a fucking problem with Freddy? What's your problem with Freddy? You don't like Fred Krueger? Freddy's Dead takes the Krueger character and it places him back in the comic zone. It ramps up the special effects and it ramps up the humor and turns Freddy like into a cartoon. Almost like, you know, they described it at the time. The director, Rachel Talalay, I think that's how you say her name. But anyway, they took Freddy to like Roadrunner extremes. That's the way they described it at the time in magazines like Gore Zone and Fangoria. They wanted to go in that kind of cartoonish direction as far as like the effects and stuff. So they played that shit up to the hilt. And the thing I like about Freddy's Dead is it has, you know, like an offbeat atmosphere to it. The director at the time, I know she said in interviews that she was influenced by the Twin Peaks movies, so she wanted to bring a little bit of that feeling, just kind of some weirdness to the overall proceedings. And, you know, I think the movie does that successfully. And it kind of blends like dark. You could never accuse Freddy's Dead of being a dark, scary movie. Because it certainly isn't. If you put Freddy's Dead up next to parts 1 and 2, now those are dark, you know, sinister. They really are. Even part 2 is, as we discussed. And Freddy's Dead, it's more in the playing things to the hilt, part 4 kind of vein. You know, part 5 went the whole gothic atmosphere realm. Well, part 6 here, it brings that humor stuff back, but I do feel like it blends elements that are disturbing in with everything, like the scenes where you see Freddy when he was still alive, and down in his cellar, he has mementos from the kills that he's been committing. You know, he's been committing murders in the fucking neighborhood. All right. And he's clipped newspaper articles that talk about the atrocities of this Springwood slasher, this person going around and, you know, committing murder in the area, you know, because Freddy Krueger, he's going around and he's killing children in this neighborhood while he's collecting mementos from this and newspaper clippings. And then he's got all these different gloves that he's working on with different ways of slicing and cutting his victims. So that's really brutal and twisted. So the movie, you know, has this nice mix of the cartoonish elements with disturbing, twisted elements as well. And I like that scene at the beginning, man, when that kid is up in the tornado, you know, it fucking looks like Wizard of Oz, and Freddy comes by and he's riding on the fucking broom like he's a wicked witch. To me, Freddy's Dead will always be a fun, nostalgic movie, and it's most certainly not a bad movie. Anyone that wants to tell you that it's a bad movie, they haven't seen enough fucking horror movies, my friend. There is so much trash. There is so much absolute grade Z schlock garbage, and you're gonna tell me that movies like Freddy's Dead and Friday 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, you're gonna tell me those are awful movies? No, dude. If you're seriously hardcore into horror and you watch everything the genre has to offer, you watch even the grade Z schlock, you cannot say that polished major studio films like Jason Part 8 and Freddy's Dead, you cannot honestly tell me you think those are bad movies devoid of merit, because I can't take you seriously if you say that. If you say those are utterly bad movies devoid of merit, that they have nothing redeemable about them, I can't take you seriously if you're saying like those are the worst that the genre has to offer. You haven't seen enough then if you think that. Because regardless, you know, you may not think they're great movies or anything, but they still have something to offer, and they're still polished pieces of work. Okay? And anyway, Freddy's Dead is a fun movie, and I love that song that plays at the beginning of Freddy's Dead. That Goo Goo Dolls song. Now, let me get this straight, my friends. I am not a Goo Goo Dolls fan. If I was, I'd tell you. Because I have nothing to hide. I don't have guilty pleasures. I don't believe in guilty pleasures. If something makes you happy and you enjoy it, it shouldn't be a guilty pleasure. You should proudly say, yeah, I enjoy that band, or I enjoy that movie, or I enjoy that book, whatever it may be. All right? But I'm telling you honestly, I'm not a Goo Goo Dolls fan, but that song at the beginning of Freddy's Dead is fucking good. I like that fucking song. I'm Awake Now. That is a good tune. It rocks. It has a haunting intro with a really good somber atmosphere, and then it just kind of busts into this rocking, you know, very simplistic riff, but it's a cool driving riff. And the way the vocalist sounds, you know, the way he sings the lines, it's just great. It has this kind of emotional resonance with me. So I like that tune, I'm Awake Now. It's a rockin' tune. Great introduction to the movie. Great intro to Freddy's Dead. It really gets the movie, you know, rocking and rolling from the very start. And then you see that kid up there on the airplane, and there's a storm raging around the airplane. It's just a great opening, sets a really good mood, I think. Way better than the mood established at the beginning of Part 5. You know what I mean? When you watch the beginning of Part 5, that's kind of a boring introduction. It's kind of slow. I mean, it's very dark and everything, but it's kind of boring. Part 6, man, is just filled with flash and energy right there at the beginning, and it sets a good mood. And the notable thing I want to say about Freddy's Dead, now that we're getting to the end of this podcast episode, is that Freddy's Dead was the last, like, true Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Freddy's Dead really did mark the end of the whole Freddy phenomenon of the true Nightmare on Elm Street series. Because the stuff that came after, they're not true Nightmare on Elm Street movies. You know, they're different. When you get to New Nightmare, the Wes Craven movie that came next, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, that's not a true Nightmare on Elm Street movie. It's something fucking different, okay? They're trying to be fucking hip and postmodern and breaking the mold and everything, and they're taking what they're doing in that movie is they're saying, oh, Freddy's this character that's in the movies, and we're going to do a reality-based thing where the actors like John Saxon and Heather Langenkamp and Robert Englund, they're all being haunted by the Freddy from the movies, but he's something much darker, a much darker force that's trying to come into reality. You know, this whole reality bending shit that the movie tries to do, and it's trying to be, like I said, real intelligent and hip and everything. It's very much a movie of its time. You know, Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out in 1994, a couple years before he did the movie Scream, and you know, this was a different time for horror. Horror was going in kind of, really wimpy directions at the time. They were all trying to call horror movies thrillers, and people really looked down on 80s horror at the time. People really looked down on 70s and 80s horror when you were at this point in time in 1994. Everything wanted to be cutting edge and hip and all this bullshit. So with Wes Craven's New Nightmare, even though it's it's technically a well-made film. It really is technically a well-made film. I can't really talk a whole lot about it because it's not a true Nightmare on Elm Street film. The cool thing about Nightmare on Elm Street 1 through Freddy's Dead, the first 6 movies, is we're in the Nightmare on Elm Street reality. The movies are the movies. It's not this movie within a movie bullshit that Wes Craven's New Nightmare tries to fucking, commit upon us. And that's the reason why New Nightmare, I do believe it didn't do real good business. There's people out there that like the movie, but it wasn't like this big box office success for Wes Craven. It really wasn't. And the reason is because I think people wanted a true Freddy movie. And that's not what Wes Craven's New Nightmare is. It's not a true Freddy movie. It's got some interesting elements to it, and like I said, technically it's a well-made production, but I don't love it like I do the first 6 Nightmare on Elm Street movies. The first 6 Freddy Krueger movies, I love those movies. New Nightmare, not so much, man. It just doesn't go the right direction for me. I'm very much like a lot of other people who are like, man, I want an actual Freddy movie. I don't want this movie within a movie bullshit, this hip cutting edge shit that they're trying to force down our throats with New Nightmare. But the funny thing about New Nightmare is despite the fact that I'm not a big fan of it, I still like the commentary track that Wes Craven does on the DVD release for it. I love Wes Craven. I'm a big fan of his work in general. He was a very intelligent man. And, even though I think he was getting a little bit too smart for his britches when he started doing movies like, New Nightmare, because let's face it, it's great to be intelligent. It's great to be well-read and philosophical and all that, and try to put a lot of subtext in your work and try to break the boundaries. That's all great stuff. But when you get a little bit too smart for your britches and you go overboard with the shit, you can kind of lose the plot. And that's what I feel New Nightmare does, all right? When Wes Craven was doing the original Nightmare on Elm Street, that is an example of a well-written, well-executed, intelligent horror movie. It is. He did it right with that one. It's funny how with the original Nightmare on Elm Street, all of his intelligence and all of his writing skills and his imagination, they all came to bear, great fruit with that original Nightmare on Elm Street. But then by the time you get to New Nightmare, he misses the mark. So, smart people can do that sometimes. Sometimes their intelligence will bear great fruit, and then other times their intelligence takes them down a wrong direction. And that's what happened with New Nightmare. But yeah, guys, I love listening to Wes Craven's commentary tracks. If you ever get a chance to listen to his commentary tracks on movies like Last House on the Left, The Hills Have Eyes, Deadly Blessing, A Nightmare on Elm Street, A New Nightmare, any movie where Wes Craven does a commentary track on any of those movies, he's really good at explaining everything, explaining his thought process, and just how his ideas came to be, how he fleshes them out, the origins, all of that stuff. And it's so fun to listen to him because he's an intelligent guy. I love listening to commentary tracks with writers and directors, okay? Because those are thought-provoking and you're actually fucking learning something. When you listen to commentary tracks with actors and actresses, people like that, you usually don't learn anything. You hear a bunch of fucking high-pitched cackling and fucking mindless chitter-chatter that you don't learn anything from. You don't glean anything new from that crap. Especially if it's a commentary track with all, female actresses. When you get a bunch of actresses together on a commentary track, oh my God, I can't even fucking listen to them. Because it's just high-pitched caterwauling and laughing and mindless bullshit. You don't learn anything from a commentary track like that. But when you get a writer-director in there, especially on a solo track where it's just the writer-director, man, those are the best commentary tracks. Sometimes you can get an actress on a commentary track and it's not so bad, but usually if you pair like 2 or 3 actresses together, that's all you're going to get. It's just a bunch of caterwauling and laughing. I mean, it's the goddamn truth. That's all they fucking do is laugh. And it's just, I can't listen to that shit. It's too high-pitched like hyenas. I want to listen to serious talk about the movie at hand. But anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on the mainline Nightmare on Elm Street series. I'm not going to talk about Freddy vs. Jason in here or that piece of shit remake, that Nightmare on Elm Street remake that they did. I'm not going to talk about those. If I need to mention those some other time, I will. I just wanted to talk about the mainline Nightmare on Elm Street series that went from 1984 to 1994, and that's what I just did. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And guess what, guys? I'll be talking to you again really, really soon.